A neighbor's doorbell camera captured something at 5:15 in the morning on August 13th, 2018. A man loading something heavy into the back of his truck, moving quickly, looking around to make sure nobody was watching. That man was Chris Watts, and what he was loading into that truck was his family, his pregnant wife, his 4-year-old daughter, his 3-year-old daughter, all 3 of them already dead. By the time the sun came up that morning, Chris Watts had driven their bodies to an oil field, buried his wife in the dirt, and dropped his little girls into separate crude oil tanks. Then he drove home, took a shower, and went to work like it was any other Monday. But here is the part that will stay with you long after this video ends. Later that same day, he stood in front of a television camera, looked directly into the lens, and begged the public to help find his missing family. And almost nobody believed him. This is the story of how one man's carefully constructed lie unraveled in less than 48 hours, how investigators caught him, what he did when they confronted him, and the deeply disturbing details that only came out years later. Details that made an already horrifying case somehow even worse. Stay with me, because this one goes deeper than you think. To understand how August 13th, 2018 happened, you have to rewind, because nothing about that morning came out of nowhere. There were cracks in this family long before that night. And when you look back at them, you start to realize that the warning signs were there the whole time. Chris Watts was 33 years old, living in Frederick, Colorado, a quiet suburban town about an hour north of Denver. He worked as an operator for Anadarko Petroleum. Physically fit, soft-spoken, unremarkable. The kind of neighbor you wave to but never really know. The kind of man nobody ever suspects. His wife, Shanann, was the complete opposite. She was warm, loud in the best way, and deeply loved by the people around her. She ran a home business selling supplements through a company called Thrive, and had built a following of over 80,000 people on Facebook. She posted everything: birthday parties, family dinners, bath time with the kids, anniversary photos. Her life was an open book, and what a life it looked like from the outside. 2 little girls, Bella, who was 4 years old, and Celeste, who the family called Cece, who was 3. And in the summer of 2018, Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant with their 3rd child, a boy. They had already picked the name Nico, but underneath that picture-perfect surface, the Watts family was quietly falling apart. They were drowning in debt. Court records show they were roughly $70,000 in the red and had already received a foreclosure notice on their home. Shanann had spent 5 weeks away in Arizona for work that summer, trying to keep the business afloat. And while she was gone, while she was working herself to the bone, to keep their family above water, Chris Watts had started an affair. Her name was Nicole Kessinger. She was a co-worker. And by the time Shanann came home in August, Chris wasn't just having an affair. He was in love with someone else. He wanted out of his marriage entirely. He just hadn't figured out how to say it yet. Or maybe, and this is the part that should make your blood run cold, maybe he had already figured it out. And the plan he came up with had nothing to do with divorce lawyers. Shanann landed back home at 1:48 in the morning on August 13th. A neighbor's doorbell camera caught her arriving, tired from travel, unaware of what was waiting for her inside that house. According to what Chris Watts later told investigators, they argued, Shanann had sensed something was wrong for weeks. She had confided in friends that Chris had been distant and cold, that the man she married felt like a stranger, that she was scared her marriage was ending while she was pregnant with their 3rd child. That night, it came to a head. Chris told her he wanted to separate. What happened next, Chris Watts has described in several different ways over the years, each version slightly different, each one carefully shaped to make himself look less like a predator. But what the physical evidence confirmed when what the medical examiner confirmed is not up for debate. At some point in those early morning hours, Chris Watts strangled Shanann to death in their bedroom. She was 34 years old, 15 weeks pregnant, and then he went upstairs to where his daughters were sleeping. Bella, 4 years old, Celeste, 3 years old, both asleep in their beds. He smothered them both. Now here is where this case shifts from devastating to something that genuinely challenges your understanding of what a human being is capable of. Because what Chris Watts did next was not the act of a man in a panic. It was not impulsive, it was organized. It was methodical. It was calculated. He loaded all 3 bodies into his work truck. He drove an hour to an oil field site called Survey 319. He dug a shallow grave with his bare hands and buried Shanann in the dirt. Then he lifted the heavy metal lids off 2 separate crude oil storage tanks that were roughly 8 feet tall, and he put his daughters inside them. He drove back home. He went to work. He did not call 911. He did not call Shanann's family. He did not reach out to a single person. He clocked in. He answered emails. He acted like it was a Tuesday. It was not until Shanann's friend Nicole Atkinson started making calls that afternoon, because Shanann had missed a prenatal appointment, which she never did, that anyone even realized something was wrong. Nicole went to the house, knocked, nothing. Called Chris. He said he hadn't heard from her either, said it was weird. At 1:40 in the afternoon, Frederick police officer Scott Coonrod arrived for a welfare check. And this, right here, is where the footage begins. Everything that happened next was captured on Officer Coonrod's body camera.
How much time to leave there?
Come here.
Usually between 5:30 and 6.
All right. And was Shanann here then?
Yes. Yeah, she's still in bed.
Does she usually watch the kids, or you have daycare watch them?
She usually watches the kids if they're not at school.
Okay. You guys have any kind of issues, marital issues, or?
We're going through separation.
You are? And how's that going?
It's going
civil for the most part, or?
Additionally, we are presented with the subtle cues of Chris's forethought cover story, being that his wife simply ran off with the kids after a breakdown in the marriage.
All the girls' blankies are gone. Their blankies they sleep with, they don't leave anywhere without them.
Good.
And when you watch it, you feel it immediately. Something is wrong with Chris Watts. Not wrong in the way a grieving husband looks wrong. Wrong in a different way. A colder way. He showed up from work calm, almost bored. He walked through the house with Officer Coonrod, pointing things out like he was giving a tour. Beds made, toys in place, no signs of a struggle anywhere, except for 2 things investigators noticed. The sheets on the master bed had been freshly changed, and Shanann's phone, which she was practically attached to, which she used to document every moment of her life, was tucked behind a pillow, not lost, not taken, hidden. Chris told Officer Coonrod the marriage was fine, no problems, no other woman, everything was good, 3 lies in under 2 minutes. The FBI was brought in within hours, and when they pulled the neighbor's doorbell footage and saw Chris loading his truck at 5:15 that morning, 2 hours before he claimed to have last spoken to Shanann, his story collapsed before it even had a chance to stand. But Chris Watts wasn't done performing. That same evening, with investigators already watching his every move, Chris Watts agreed to go on television. He stood in front of his house. He wore a Thrive patch on his arm, the brand his missing wife had poured her heart into. He looked into the camera, and he said he just wanted his family back. "This house is not a home when I walk in this door," he said. He talked about Bella. called her his little firecracker. He talked about Celeste. And he described Shanann as someone he missed desperately. Then the reporter asked the question everyone watching already felt was coming. Was there anything going on in the marriage? Chris paused. And in what may have been the single biggest miscalculation of his entire cover-up, he admitted, on live television, that he had told Shanann he wanted to separate the morning she disappeared. He thought this made him look honest, like a man with nothing to hide. Instead, it handed investigators a motive on a silver platter.
Like when I got home yesterday, it was like a ghost town. Like she wasn't here, kids weren't here. I have no idea like where they went. Right now it's you got K9 units, the sheriff's department. Everybody's like they're doing their best right now to figure out like if they can get a scent. If she wasn't here, like where did she go? Like once I got here, it was like, all right, who can I call? I called her 3 times, texted her about 3 times just to say, you know, what's going on? Like if she's vanished, like I want her back so bad. I want those kids back so bad. Right now, I don't even want to just like throw anything out there. Like I hope that she's somewhere safe right now and with the kids. Last night, I wanted that knock on the door. I wanted to see those kids just run in, just barrel rush me and just give me a hug and knock me on the ground. That's why last night was just horrible. I couldn't do it.
Within 24 hours, he was sitting across a table from the FBI. On August 15th, Chris Watts took a voluntary polygraph. He failed. What followed was an interrogation that has been studied, dissected, and analyzed by criminologists, FBI trainers, and true crime researchers ever since. And the reason it gets studied is because of what Chris Watts chose to do when the pressure got too high. He didn't confess. Not really. Not to what he actually did. Instead, he blamed Shanann. He looked investigators in the eye and told them he had walked into the bedroom that morning and found Shanann with her hands around Celeste's throat, that he had snapped, that he had grabbed Shanann and strangled her to stop her from killing their daughter, that by the time he got upstairs to Bella, Shanann had already gotten to her. He said he panicked, didn't know what to do, disposed of the bodies to protect his wife's memory. Sit with that for a second. The man who strangled his pregnant wife, who smothered his 2 toddlers, who drove their bodies to an oil field and dropped his little girls into crude oil tanks. That man sat across from FB1 agents and tried to turn himself into the victim of the woman he murdered. Investigators didn't blink.
Her phone's still on the couch, her purse is still there, the medicine for the kids is still there, the car seat is still there, and there's no sign of them anywhere. Okay. I was just hoping that, I left all the lights on in the house, I was hoping that I'd get a knock on the door. But
yeah,
nothing. Yeah, but nothing happened.
What do you think happened?
At first, I really thought maybe she was just at somebody's house, just decompressing.
Just blowing off steam?
Yeah. But after today, like with the onslaught of all the cars, all the police cars, all the news, all the K9 units, it's making me lean the other direction about someone took her.
Okay.
But it's just, if someone took her, it would have to have been someone she knew. Because there's no sign of anything like being disturbed, broken.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's the way I'm leaning now. At first I thought for real she was just decompressing somewhere. I thought she was safe, even though everything in the house was left there.
They had Shanann's text messages, her phone calls, statements from dozens of friends and family members. There was not a single person in Shanann Watts' life who described her as anything other than a fiercely devoted, deeply loving mother. There was zero evidence to support what Chris was claiming. None. He was arrested on August 15th, 2018. 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of unlawful termination of a pregnancy, 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. But they still needed to find them. Chris hadn't told investigators where he'd taken the bodies. So using his cell phone data, GPS records from his work truck, and coordinates from Anadarko Petroleum, investigators zeroed in on the Survey 319 site. On August 16th, 3 days after the murders, they arrived. Shanann was found in a shallow grave about 60 feet from the oil tanks. She was still wearing the same clothes she'd had on when she came home from her trip. Bella and Celeste were recovered from separate tanks filled with crude oil. Getting them out required specialized equipment. It took hours. The medical examiner confirmed everything. Shanann had been strangled. The girls had been smothered. Nico, the son they had already named the baby Shanann had been so excited about, died with his mother. The whole family, gone. Frederick held a vigil. Flowers covered the sidewalk outside the house. And across the country, the 80,000 people who had followed Shanann's Facebook page, who had watched her daughters grow up, who had celebrated her pregnancy announcement, grieved like they had lost someone they knew personally, because in a way, they had. In November 2018, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms with no possibility of parole.
Understood, and I respect that decision to request that the district attorney not seek the death penalty in this case. And so the court is going to accept this plea bargain under the circumstances. Words that come to mind when I hear the evidence in this case are a senseless crime and the viciousness of the crime. And equally aggravating in this court's determination is the despicable act of disposing of the bodies in the manner in which they were done in this case. I've been a judicial officer now for starting my 17th year, and I could objectively say that this is...
He's currently in Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, where he will die. But the case didn't close there. In 2019, a woman named Sharon Cadle, who had been writing to Watts in prison, released recorded conversations with him, what became known as the Cadle tapes. And in those tapes, Chris Watts finally dropped the story about Shanann hurting the girls. He gave a more detailed account of what actually happened that night. Investigators also sat down with Watts formally in 2019. And in that interview, he confirmed something that had been suspected but not yet stated on record. Bella and Celeste were still alive when he put them in his truck. They were alive for the hour-long drive to Curvy 319. And forensic evidence from the scene, evidence that was never fully detailed publicly out of respect for the family, indicated that Bella, at 4 years old, had not gone quietly. She fought back. Let that sit for a moment.
I don't think so, but I was blocking her face and my hand was right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You had one hand here and one hand over her mouth?
And were you just pushing her against the back of the seat type thing? Okay. What was Bella doing?
Just sitting there next to it. She didn't know what was going on.
Okay. Could she see you? Okay. Tell me about what you were thinking.
I wasn't. If I was thinking it's what would happen.
Yeah.
Or any partial hint of what I feel for those girls and what I feel for my wife, but none of this would have happened, so I wasn't thinking.
Okay.
The Chris Watts case gets cited in FBI training programs. It shows up in criminology textbooks. It gets referenced in nearly every serious conversation about family homicide and the psychology of intimate partner violence. But beyond all of that, beyond the academic study of it, this is a story about a woman named Shanann who worked incredibly hard, who loved her kids fiercely, who was excited about her future, and who came home in the middle of the night just wanting to fix her marriage. She had no idea she was walking into her house for the last time. It's a story about Bella, who was 4 years old and brave beyond anything a 4-year-old should ever have to be. It's a story about Cece, who was 3 and had her whole life ahead of her. It's a story about Nico, who never got to take a single breath. The lesson that echoes through every detail of this case is not complicated. It's this: evil does not always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like a quiet neighbor, a devoted husband, a man in a Thrive patch standing in front of a camera telling you he just wants his family back. Chris Watts will never see another free sunrise, and that is the only part of this story that ends the way it should. If this video meant something to you, please leave a like. It helps more people find stories that deserve to be told. I've linked all sources in the description below. Subscribe to Unsealed Files to uncover the next case.